History is a story filled with pages we have yet to read. Across the globe, our ancestors left behind structures and objects that defy simple explanation, challenging everything we think we know about their world. This exploration will reveal 15 of the ancient world's most baffling phenomena, offering you a new perspective on the ingenuity of lost civilizations. How did a 2,000-year-old device predict celestial events with clockwork precision? And why would a culture carve a sprawling desert canvas only visible from the sky? The answers are not what you expect. By the end, you will see the past not as a linear march of progress, but as a landscape of profound and forgotten brilliance. What does it mean when the physical evidence contradicts the official story? From the quiet depths of the Aegean Sea, a corroded artifact emerged that would shatter our timeline of human invention. In the year 1901, sponge divers exploring a Roman shipwreck near the island of Antikythera recovered a lump of bronze and wood, initially dismissed as a piece of nautical debris. Yet, decades later, when researchers began to carefully clean and X-ray the fragments, they saw something impossible. Inside was an intricate assembly of precisely cut gears, some with teeth so fine they resembled the workings of an 18th-century Swiss clock. This was the Antikythera Mechanism, a device crafted around 100 years before the Common Era. It was not a simple tool, but a complex analog computer designed to model the cosmos. By turning a hand crank, its user could predict the positions of the sun, moon, and known planets, forecast lunar and solar eclipses, and even track the cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. The most astonishing component is a set of differential gears, a technology historians believed was not invented until the 16th century. This single device implies a flourishing school of advanced mechanical engineering in ancient Greece, a tradition that has left no other trace in the archaeological record. How could such sophisticated knowledge simply disappear? The mechanism stands as a silent witness, a ghost in the machine of history, reminding us that our ancestors' intellectual landscape may have been far more vast and complex than the ruins they left behind suggest. That same spark of ingenuity, that fleeting grasp of a principle not yet named, appears again in a collection of ordinary-looking objects stored away from public view. In the basement of the National Museum of Iraq, one can find a set of curious artifacts unearthed near Baghdad in the 1930s. Each consists of a simple terracotta jar, roughly the size of a man's fist. Inside each jar sits a rolled copper cylinder, and within that cylinder, an iron rod. The jars show signs of being sealed with asphalt or bitumen, which also insulated the iron rod from the copper. To any modern eye familiar with basic science, the arrangement is instantly recognizable. If you were to fill such a jar with an acidic liquid, something as common as vinegar or grape juice, you would create a simple chemical battery. The acidic electrolyte would react with the two different metals, generating a small but measurable electric current. These objects, known collectively as the Baghdad Battery, date from a period spanning roughly 250 years before the Common Era to 650 years after. Their existence asks a profound and unsettling question. Did a civilization living over 2 millennia ago possess a working, albeit primitive, understanding of electrochemistry? The implications ripple outward. What possible use could such a faint current have served? Some researchers propose a practical application in electroplating, suggesting the current could have been used to deposit a thin layer of gold onto silver objects, a technique known from the period. Others imagine a more mystical purpose, where the gentle tingle of electricity was used in religious ceremonies or medical practices, perhaps to create a sense of awe or a perceived healing touch. Yet the skeptical viewpoint is equally strong. No wires have been found with these jars, no devices to complete a circuit, no clear documentation of their use. Could they simply have been storage vessels for sacred scrolls, with the iron and copper serving a purely structural or symbolic role? The debate itself is the point. Whether they were batteries or not, their design is too perfectly aligned with the principles of a galvanic cell to be easily dismissed as coincidence. They represent a ghost of a possibility, a thread of practical knowledge that, like the gears of the Antikythera Mechanism, seems to have been snipped from the tapestry of history. They challenge the comforting linear story of scientific progress, suggesting that discovery is not a straight line but a flickering light, sometimes glimpsed, often forgotten, only to be found again centuries later. The silent precision of the Antikythera Mechanism and the quiet potential of the Baghdad batteries speak to a mastery of materials and mathematics. But in the humid jungles of Central America, an ancient culture expressed its understanding of the world through a language of pure, perfect form. Deep within the Diquis Delta of Costa Rica, hundreds of massive stone spheres lie scattered across the landscape, as if some giant's game of marbles was abandoned centuries ago. These are the stone spheres of Costa Rica, and their silent, geometric perfection presents a puzzle of both engineering and intention. Crafted by the pre-Columbian Diquis culture between the years 300 and 1500 of the Common Era, these spheres are not rough approximations. They are monuments of startling precision, carved from a single, incredibly hard block of igneous rock like gabbro. The largest are over 2 meters in diameter and weigh several tons, yet their surfaces are smoothly curved, their shapes so consistently spherical that modern measurements reveal only the tiniest of imperfections. This raises the first, most practical mystery. How did a people without metal tools, without the wheel, achieve such geometric perfection? The process likely began with selecting a suitable boulder, then using other, harder stones to peck and grind away the surface in a painstaking, generations-long effort. Some researchers suggest a possible shortcut where fires were built against the stone and then doused with cold water, causing thermal shock and fracturing the surface to make the initial shaping easier. Yet even this theory does not fully explain the final, polished uniformity. The labor involved was immense, a communal act of dedication that speaks to the sphere's profound importance. Then comes the even greater puzzle of purpose. Why go to such extraordinary lengths? When first discovered by modern explorers in the 1930s, many spheres had been moved from their original locations, disrupting any potential patterns. But careful archaeological work has suggested alignments. Some spheres were found arranged in lines or geometric shapes, leading to theories they served as astronomical markers, pointing to solstice sunrises or significant stars. Others believe they functioned as symbols of power and status, placed near the homes of chiefs to denote authority and cosmic connection. They may have marked territorial boundaries or sacred pathways. Their uniformity is the key, a visual language of harmony and balance that likely reflected the Diquis culture's worldview, a desire to impose perfect, celestial order upon the untamed earth. The tragedy is that we hear only one side of this conversation. The Diquis left no written records to explain their silent sentinels. The spheres are the message, but we have lost the cipher to decode it. They stand not as ruins but as completed statements, their meaning hovering just beyond our grasp, a testament to a value system that prized perfection itself as the highest form of expression. While stone spheres communicate through silent geometry, another artifact speaks in a language no one alive can understand. Tucked away in the climate-controlled vault of Yale University's Voynich Library rests a book that has stubbornly refused to reveal its secrets. Known as the Voynich Manuscript, this codex dates to the early 15th century and is arguably the world's most famous unreadable text. Its pages are a mesmerizing and deeply perplexing gallery of the unknown. You will find meticulous illustrations of plants that match no species in any botanical record, their roots and leaves arranged with a naturalist's care for something that never existed. There are intricate astrological charts populated by unfamiliar constellations and zodiac-like symbols. Perhaps most curiously, there are sections showing numerous nude female figures, often depicted bathing in or connected by networks of elaborate green pipes and pools, a scene that has fueled endless speculation about its meaning. Every image is surrounded by flowing text written in a unique, elegant script, an alphabet of roughly 30 distinct characters that form over 170,000 words of untranslated prose. This is not a case of a forgotten language like Linear B, which was eventually decoded using known linguistic roots. The Voynich script shows statistical patterns consistent with a real language, with word lengths and character repetitions that follow natural rules, yet it correlates with no known writing system on Earth. For over a century, the best minds in cryptography, from World War II codebreakers to modern artificial intelligence researchers, have attacked the manuscript. Advanced algorithms designed to detect patterns and hidden ciphers have been deployed, yet they all hit the same wall. The text resists every analytical tool we have, as if it operates on a logic entirely its own. This resilience has spawned a spectrum of theories about its origin. Some argue it is an extraordinarily elaborate and purposeless medieval hoax, crafted to defraud a wealthy patron. Others propose it records a lost natural language or a constructed tongue, perhaps documenting herbal or alchemical knowledge meant only for a secretive few. There is even a fringe suggestion it could be a glossolalia text, a stream of unconscious symbols given written form. What makes the Voynich manuscript so captivating is not the potential information it contains, but its perfect, enduring silence. It is a locked door for which we cannot find the key, a mirror that reflects only our own curiosity. It represents the ultimate limit of modern decipherment, a humbling reminder that the past can speak directly to us in a voice we are utterly incapable of hearing. The mystery endures not for lack of trying, but because the manuscript protects its truth with an elegance that has outlasted empires. From the locked pages of an unreadable book, we journey to a landscape where the message is written across the earth itself, on a scale so vast it can only be comprehended from the heavens. The Nazca Desert of southern Peru is a place of profound silence and stark beauty, a high plateau where rain almost never falls and the wind is a gentle, preserving breath. To walk across this plain is to tread upon a reddish canvas of sun-baked pebbles, seeing only a seemingly random network of shallow trenches and cleared pathways. But ascend into the sky and the entire desert floor transforms. What seemed like scattered scratches resolve into a breathtaking aerial art gallery, a collection of over 300 colossal geoglyphs etched with stunning clarity. Here, a hummingbird with wings outstretched spans nearly 100 meters. A spiraling monkey, complete with a gracefully curled tail, measures over 130 meters. A perfectly symmetrical spider, an orca, a tree, and even a mysterious humanoid figure some call the astronaut, all lie intermingled with miles of straight lines, trapezoids, and spirals that stretch to the horizon. These lines were not built but revealed. The Nazca people, flourishing between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, created them through a deceptively simple technique. They carefully removed the top layer of dark, iron oxide-coated pebbles, exposing the lighter, sandy soil beneath. The dry, windless climate of the region has acted as a perfect preservative, keeping these designs intact for well over 1,000 years. The precision is staggering. Many of the long, straight lines run for kilometers with barely a deviation, and the animal figures maintain perfect proportions despite their immense size. This leads to the central, captivating puzzle. How did a culture without flight, without any apparent high vantage point like a nearby mountain, design and execute such precise, large-scale artwork intended for a viewer in the sky? The practical methods are within reach of their technology. Researchers have demonstrated that with simple surveying techniques using wooden stakes and ropes, scaling up a small model drawing into a giant desert design is entirely possible. The greater mystery lies in the why. What drove this immense communal effort? One enduring theory suggests the lines formed a giant astronomical calendar, with certain figures and alignments pointing to key solar and celestial events, crucial for an agricultural society's timing. Another compelling idea frames them as sacred pathways, walked during ritual processions to invoke life-giving water from the deities, a desperate and hopeful dialogue with the arid sky. Some even propose they served as landing markers or messages for celestial beings, though this ventures into more speculative territory. Perhaps the most profound interpretation is that they were never meant for mortal eyes at all, but were offerings made visible only to the gods who dwelled above, a permanent prayer etched into the skin of the world. The Nazca Lines defy a single explanation because they speak to a fundamental human impulse, one that connects the Voynich Manuscript's secret language and the stone sphere's perfect form. It is the desire to communicate something essential that transcends the individual and the momentary, to inscribe meaning onto the world in a way that outlasts generations. They are a testament not to a lost technology, but to a lost cosmology, a way of seeing humanity's place within a vast and watchful universe. They remind us that sometimes the most important messages are written not to be read easily, but to be remembered forever. A map drawn on gazelle skin holds a coastline that should not exist. In the year 1513, Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis compiled a world map, noting in its margins that he used 20 different source charts, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. The resulting document, known as the Piri Reis Map, is a fragment showing the Atlantic Ocean and the surrounding lands. Its depiction of the western coast of Africa and the eastern bulge of South America is unnervingly precise for its era, with accurate longitudes that European maps would not achieve for another 2 centuries. Yet it is the lower left corner of the parchment that ignites a firestorm of debate. There, below the southern tip of South America, lies a landmass with a distinct, jagged coastline. Piri Reis labeled it, but the text is ambiguous. To many who have studied the contour, it bears a startling resemblance to the northern coastline of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, a continent that would remain officially undiscovered for over 300 more years. The implication is staggering because this map does not show a frozen, glacial shore. It shows a land free of ice with rivers and bays, a landscape that has not been visible since Antarctica began its deep freeze millions of years ago. How could a 16th century admiral with the tools of his time chart a continent buried under miles of ice? The map itself offers a clue in its own annotations. Piri Reis wrote that he consulted ancient source maps, including one drawn in the time of Alexander. This suggests he was not surveying these lands himself, but was a compiler, a curator of far older geographic knowledge passed down through generations of seafarers. Scholars proposing this theory point to the possibility of advanced cartographic traditions from ancient civilizations like the Greeks or the legendary seafaring Phoenicians, cultures whose complete maps have been lost to time. Could fragments of their global knowledge have survived in isolated libraries or oral traditions, only to be pieced together centuries later by a curious Ottoman scholar? The mainstream counterargument is one of mistaken identity. Perhaps the controversial landmass is not Antarctica at all, but a speculative, distorted version of South America's southern coast, a common practice in early cartography where unknown regions were filled with guesswork. Yet the precise fit of the coastline to the subglacial topography of Antarctica, a detail only confirmed by modern seismic surveys in the 20th century, makes this simple explanation feel uncomfortably incomplete. The Piri Reis Map, therefore, is more than a historical artifact. It is a question mark drawn in ink and parchment. It challenges the linear narrative of exploration, whispering that the ancient world's understanding of our planet may have been both broader and more accurate than we dare to assume. It presents a vision of the Earth not as a series of continents slowly discovered, but as a known world that was later forgotten, its maps crumbling to dust, leaving behind only a single, tantalizing fragment on gazelle skin. High in the thin air of the Peruvian Andes, a fortress wall defies the very idea of a joint. The site is Sacsayhuamán, a monumental complex overlooking the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, and its walls are a masterclass in impossible masonry. Constructed in the 15th century under the reign of the Inca Pachacuti, these are not mere barriers of stacked stone. They are intricate, gravity-defying puzzles carved from limestone. Individual blocks, some weighing well over 100 tons, are polygonal giants with as many as 12 distinct sides. Yet each colossal piece fits perfectly against its neighbors, interlocking in a seamless, sinuous pattern that ripples along the hillside. The precision is so absolute that for centuries, locals have said not even a blade of grass nor the thin edge of a paper can be inserted between them. No mortar was used. The strength of the wall lies solely in the genius of its fit, a testament to a stoneworking tradition that seems to bend the rules of physics. The questions begin with the raw material itself. How did the Inca, without iron tools or the wheel, quarry these monstrous blocks from distant hills? The likely method involved driving wooden wedges into natural fissures, then soaking the wood to make it expand, slowly and deliberately prying the stone from the earth. But this is only the first step in a logistical nightmare. Transporting a 200-ton block across mountainous terrain remains a staggering challenge. Many researchers believe the stones were dragged on rollers made of logs, pulled by thousands of laborers using ropes made from leather and plant fibers, a monumental feat of coordinated human effort that speaks to the incredible social organization of the Inca Empire. Then comes the true magic, the fitting. How do you shape an irregular, multi-ton block to match the unique, contoured hollow of its neighbor with such flawless precision? One persistent theory suggests the Inca possessed knowledge of a plant, perhaps from the sapu genus, whose sap could soften stone to a clay-like consistency, allowing artisans to mold it into place. While intriguing, no conclusive evidence for such a substance has ever been found. The more widely accepted, though no less astonishing, explanation is one of relentless, patient craftsmanship. Stonemasons likely used a method called trial and error fitting. A block would be roughly shaped at the quarry, moved to the wall, and then meticulously dressed in place. Using harder stones as hammers and abrasive sand as a grinding agent, workers would slowly, incrementally, carve and polish the contacting surfaces until the fit was perfect. This process, repeated for thousands of blocks, represents an almost unimaginable investment of time and skill. It was not simply construction, it was a form of high-stakes sculpture. The result is a structure of phenomenal durability. The interlocking design and slight inward lean of the walls make them incredibly resistant to the earthquakes that frequently shake the Andes. While Spanish conquistadors later dismantled parts of the complex to build their own city below, the remaining walls have stood unshaken for 5 centuries. To stand before them is to feel a profound sense of harmony. The walls do not conquer the landscape, they converse with it. Each stone, with its unique facets, is like a fingerprint pressed into the whole, a permanent record of a craftsman's intent. This was more than engineering, it was a philosophy made solid, a belief that perfection could be achieved through patience, community, and a deep, reverent understanding of the very bones of the earth. Beneath the quiet fields of rural China lies a hollowed-out world. In 1992, Farmers in Zhejiang province decided to pump the water from a series of local ponds, expecting to find nothing more than mud and fish. Instead, their pumps revealed the dark mouth of an enormous cavern. This was no natural formation. As they ventured inside, they discovered a vast, meticulously carved underground palace, the first of what we now call the Longyou Caves. To date, 24 such caverns have been uncovered, sprawling across an area of 30,000 square meters. Stepping into one is an experience that defies expectation. You are not entering a rough grotto, but a grand, subterranean hall. The ceilings soar to heights of 30 meters, supported by massive, evenly spaced pillars of solid sandstone that seem to hold up the very weight of the earth. The walls, pillars, and ceilings are not left rough. They are covered entirely from floor to ceiling in a uniform pattern of parallel chisel marks, each stroke carved at a precise 60-degree angle. This is not functional quarrying, it is decoration on an almost insane scale, a deliberate aesthetic choice made in a space meant for darkness. The sheer volume of labor is incomprehensible. Archaeologists estimate that to create these chambers, ancient workers would have had to excavate and remove nearly 1 million cubic meters of stone. Where did all that rock go? No massive pile of rubble has ever been found in the surrounding area. The logistics are a nightmare. Lighting, ventilation, structural planning, and the coordination of thousands of workers would have been required for a project that, according to carbon dating, was undertaken at least 2,000 years ago. Yet here is the most baffling silence of all. Not a single historical document, local legend, or piece of folklore from the region mentions the construction of these caves. It is as if a society capable of this monumental feat simply forgot it ever happened or chose never to speak of it. The purpose is equally shrouded. The acoustic properties within the chambers are extraordinary, with sound carrying in unusual ways, suggesting a possible ritual or ceremonial use. The consistent 60-degree chisel angle is a fingerprint of the builders, a signature of a specific school of craftsmanship that has left no other trace. Were they a secret imperial tomb complex that was never used, a hidden refuge, a ceremonial space for a forgotten religion? The caves offer no inscriptions, no artifacts, no bones. They are pure architecture, a statement without a translation. They stand as a monument to a collective act of will so profound that its memory was either erased or deemed too sacred to record. To walk through the Longyou Caves is to walk through a question. You are surrounded by the undeniable evidence of human genius, of a project that must have defined generations, and yet you are completely alone with the echo of your own footsteps. It is a reminder that history is not just what is written, but also what is deliberately buried, waiting centuries for a farmer's pump to reveal that the ground beneath our feet is not nearly as solid or as silent as we assume. Deep within the temple of Hathor at Dendera, a stone wall holds an image that seems to flicker with anachronistic light. Carved around 50 years before the Common Era, a detailed relief shows a large, elongated object resembling a glass bulb. Inside this bulb, a snake stretches along its length, with its head touching a lotus flower at one end. The snake is held aloft by a pillar, and a cable-like line connects the base of the object to a small box gripped by a kneeling figure. To a modern eye, the interpretation feels almost irresistible. It looks exactly like a giant light bulb, complete with a filament, a socket, and a power source. This is the carving known as the Dendera Light, and it has become a flashpoint for one of archaeology's most persistent debates. Is it a literal depiction of forgotten technology, or a profound misunderstanding of sacred symbolism? Those who argue for a technological interpretation point to the components: the bulb-like shape, the serpentine filament, the connecting cable, and the box, which they suggest could be a power source like the Baghdad Battery, all seem to form a coherent electrical diagram. They propose that such knowledge, perhaps used to illuminate the dark interiors of tombs and temples, was lost with the fall of ancient Egyptian civilization, preserved only in this cryptic stone code. The idea is undeniably captivating, suggesting a hidden chapter of scientific history. Mainstream Egyptology, however, offers a different, deeply contextual reading. They explain that the relief is part of a larger cosmological narrative decorating the temple walls. In this story, the god Harsomptus, a serpent deity representing life force and renewal, is born from a lotus flower that emerges from the primordial waters. The so-called bulb is actually the lotus blossom, the serpent is the god himself, and the pillar is his support. The box held by the priest is not a battery, but a jed pillar, a symbol of stability. The entire scene is a spiritual allegory for creation, resurrection, and the divine spark of life, not a technical schematic. This clash of interpretations is the true heart of the mystery. It reveals the immense difficulty of viewing ancient art through a modern lens. We are a culture defined by electricity and machinery, so we instinctively see a light bulb. The ancient Egyptians were a culture defined by myth, symbolism, and the cyclical nature of existence, so they carved a story of a god's birth. The Dendera Light forces us to confront our own assumptions. It asks whether we are projecting our world onto theirs, or if we are sometimes too quick to dismiss the possibility that their understanding of natural forces, expressed in a mythological language, might have been more nuanced than we know. The carving does not need to be a literal light bulb to be revolutionary. It represents a moment where art, religion, and a curiosity about the fundamental energies of the universe converged into a single, enduring image. It continues to spark not because it provides an answer, but because it holds a mirror to our own desire to find our reflection in the distant past. Buried beneath a Scottish field for half a century, a 5,000-year-old canvas awaited its second unveiling. In 2015, archaeologists carefully removed layers of protective soil from a site near Clydebank, revealing the full, breathtaking scope of the Cochno Stone. This was not a small artifact, but a colossal slab of sandstone, roughly the size of a tennis court, and its surface was a dense, swirling tapestry of mystery. Carved around 3,000 years before the Common Era, the stone is a masterwork of Neolithic artistry, covered in hundreds of intricate symbols. You will see deep, circular hollows known as cup marks, surrounded by concentric rings that ripple outward like waves from a dropped stone. Graceful spirals coil and unwind, while geometric grooves and ladder-like patterns intersect in a complex, seemingly purposeful design. The sheer density of the carving is overwhelming, a testament to countless hours of patient pecking and grinding with stone tools, an investment of communal effort that speaks to the stone's profound significance. But what does it all mean? The Cochno Stone is perhaps the most spectacular example of a phenomenon found across Atlantic Europe, from Scotland to Portugal, a shared visual language etched into the landscape by Neolithic and Bronze Age peoples. The consistency of the symbols across vast distances suggests these were not random doodles, but a coherent system of communication or mapping, a code that has long since fallen silent. One compelling theory views the stone as a celestial map. The cup and ring marks, with their central points and surrounding circles, could represent stars, planets, or significant cosmic events. The entire slab might be a permanent record of the night sky, a way to track the movements that govern planting, harvest, and ritual. Others see it as a sacred site for rituals, where the act of carving itself was a form of communion with the earth, and the patterns served as focal points for ceremonies, perhaps involving water, offerings, or trance states. The spirals, a nearly universal symbol of journey and transformation, could indicate portals to other realms or maps of the underworld. Another idea proposes it is a form of prehistoric storytelling, a permanent record of myths, genealogies, or territorial claims, where each symbol is a word in a forgotten narrative. The true frustration and beauty of the Cochno Stone lies in its silent eloquence. We can recognize the patterns as language, but we cannot read the sentences. To stand before it is to stand at the edge of a vast cognitive gap, trying to glimpse the worldview of people who saw the universe not as separate from them, but as a story in which they were active characters, a story they felt compelled to tell in stone. It challenges our modern assumption that communication requires written words. Here, meaning was conveyed through shape, repetition, and placement, a symbolic logic that wove the celestial, the spiritual, and the social into one interconnected whole. The stone was reburied after its study to protect it from modern damage, a return to its long slumber beneath the grass. In a way, this act feels fitting. It is a reminder that some messages from the past are not meant to be fully decoded, only witnessed. They ask us not for a definitive translation, but for a moment of humble contemplation, to consider the human mind that, 5 millennia ago, looked up at the stars and down at a stone and saw a connection worth carving for eternity. Sometimes a story becomes so compelling it takes on a life of its own. In the year 1938, a tale emerged from the remote Bayan Karaula Mountains on the border between China and Tibet that would become a cornerstone of ancient astronaut speculation. According to the account, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-te discovered a series of caves containing an astonishing array of artifacts. Inside, he reportedly found rows of neat, stone-lined graves holding the remains of individuals with unusually small stature and large, elongated skulls. Scattered nearby were hundreds of peculiar stone discs, each roughly a foot in diameter, with a hole in the center and a fine, double-grooved spiral carving leading from the hole to the outer edge. These were the so-called Dropa Stones. The story claims that upon closer inspection, the grooves were not merely decorative, but a form of microscopic hieroglyphic writing. When allegedly translated years later by a professor named Tarim Mummies, the inscriptions told a breathtaking narrative. They described a group of beings, the Dropa, whose spacecraft crash landed in the mountains 12,000 years ago. Unable to repair their vessel, the survivors took refuge in the caves, eventually integrating with the local human population. This narrative, with its direct description of extraterrestrial contact in deep antiquity, was a perfect storm of mystery. It combined unexplained artifacts, unusual physical remains, and a lost history, all set in an inaccessible location. The legend grew through books and documentaries, captivating those fascinated by the idea that our past was shaped by visitors from the stars. Yet when subjected to scholarly scrutiny, the entire edifice begins to crumble. No reputable museum in the world holds a Dropa stone. The principal figures in the story, Kai Pu-te and Tarim Mummies, cannot be verified as real historical scholars in any academic record. The initial reports are traced not to scientific journals, but to a German magazine article in the 1960s, which itself relied on unverifiable sources. Mainstream archaeology dismisses the case as an elaborate hoax, a layered fabrication that plays on our desire for cosmic connections. The skeletal remains, if they existed at all, could likely be explained by known burial practices or regional physical variations. The stone discs themselves bear a strong resemblance to common Bai discs, ancient Chinese ritual artifacts symbolizing heaven, which are well documented and have no connection to alien inscriptions. The enduring power of the Dropa Stone story, however, is not in its truth but in its function. It acts as a modern myth, a mirror reflecting our timeless fascination with origins and the possibility that we are not alone. It demonstrates how a vacuum of information can be filled by a narrative that feels intuitively satisfying, weaving together our awe of the cosmos and our curiosity about the unexplained gaps in the human story. This phenomenon serves less as an archaeological puzzle and more as a profound cautionary tale. It highlights the critical distinction between open-minded inquiry and uncritical acceptance. reminding us that extraordinary claims require not just compelling stories, but verifiable, tangible evidence that can be studied and challenged by the scientific community. The stones may be fiction, but the human yearning they represent is very, very real. The story of human progress is often told as a simple sequence, a checklist of inventions that mark our ascent. First came agriculture, then villages, then temples, and finally cities. But on a windswept hill in southeastern Turkey, that entire story collapses. Here, at a site known as Göbekli Tepe, the timeline reverses. The temples came first, long before the invention of pottery or the wheel, before the first seeds of domesticated wheat were ever sown. Hunter-gatherers achieved something that should have been impossible. Around 9,600 years before the Common Era, a staggering 6 millennia before the first stones of Stonehenge were raised, these people erected a monumental sanctuary of staggering ambition. They carved massive limestone pillars from the nearby bedrock, each one weighing many tons, and arranged them into a series of at least 20 great stone circles. These are not rough monoliths. They are finely worked T-shaped pillars, many standing over 5 meters tall, with crossbars clearly representing human arms and hands carved in relief along their sides. They are not blank sentinels, they are canvases adorned with an elaborate bestiary of carved reliefs. You will see foxes, cranes, scorpions, lions, and boars, all rendered with a fluid, artistic skill that speaks of a rich symbolic world. This is the central, earth-shaking revelation of Göbekli Tepe. The most complex architecture ever discovered from its era was not built by settled farmers with surplus food and labor. It was created by nomadic foragers, people who supposedly lived hand to mouth. The logistics are mind-bending. Quarrying, shaping, transporting, and erecting these pillars would have required the coordinated labor of hundreds of people over many months, all while sustaining themselves through hunting and gathering. This implies a level of social organization, planning, and shared purpose that archaeologists never attributed to pre-agricultural societies. It suggests these communities were far more complex than we imagined, capable of coming together from across a wide region for a common, sacred goal. The purpose of the site seems overwhelmingly ritualistic. There is no evidence of permanent settlement, no houses, no grain storage pits. Instead, the circles appear to be enclosures for ceremonial gathering. The intense focus on animal imagery, some of which may represent constellations, points to a sophisticated cosmology, a story about humanity's place in the natural and spiritual world that was important enough to literally move mountains for. This turns the traditional narrative of the Neolithic Revolution on its head. For decades, we believed that the discovery of agriculture, with its stable food supply, allowed for permanent settlements, which then gave people the leisure and social structure to develop complex religion and build monuments. Göbekli Tepe proposes the opposite. Perhaps it was the need to build and maintain such a sacred place, to feed and organize the large groups gathering there for rituals, that created the pressure to settle down and cultivate reliable food sources. The ritual came first, and agriculture followed to support it. Then, around 8,000 years before the Common Era, the builders did something as deliberate as the construction itself. They carefully buried the entire complex under thousands of tons of earth and rubble, filling the great stone circles to their tops. This was not an act of destruction or abandonment. It was a preservation, a deliberate interment, as if they were putting their greatest creation to sleep, protecting it for a future they would never see. This final act adds a profound layer of intentional mystery. Why go to such lengths to hide what you built with such effort? Was it a ritual closing, a way to sanctify the site forever? Or did the belief system that spawned it change so fundamentally that the old symbols needed to be respectfully retired? Göbekli Tepe does not give us easy answers. Instead, it offers a monumental question mark carved in stone. It forces us to reconsider the very engines of civilization, suggesting that what drives humanity to its greatest collective achievements is not just practical need, but a shared story, a common dream, powerful enough to reshape the world and then, with equal purpose, to gently return it to the earth. The silent, deliberate burial of Göbekli Tepe speaks to a profound reverence for a sacred place. Yet on the most isolated inhabited island on Earth, a culture expressed that same reverence by raising silent giants to face the land of the living. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is a speck of volcanic rock in the vast southeastern Pacific, over 2,000 kilometers from the nearest inhabited shore. Its complete isolation makes what covers its slopes all the more astonishing. Scattered across the landscape are nearly 900 monolithic human figures, the Moai. Carved by the Rapa Nui people between 1250 and 1500 of the Common Era, these are not small idols. They average 4 meters in height and weigh around 14 tons, with the largest unfinished statue, nicknamed El Gigant, measuring over 20 meters and weighing an estimated 270 tons. They were hewn from compressed volcanic ash, or tuff, at a single quarry within the Rono Raraku crater. To stand at the base of this quarry today is to witness a gallery of giants in various states of emergence. Dozens of partially carved moai remain embedded in the rock, as if the sculptors simply walked away one day, leaving their work forever half-born from the mountain. Each completed statue is a stylized representation of a head and torso, with elongated features, strong brows, and prominent noses. Their backs are often covered in intricate petroglyphs, and they were not originally the blank, eyeless sentinels we often picture. Once transported to their ceremonial platforms called ahu along the coast, their eye sockets were inlaid with white coral and obsidian, a final act of bringing them to life, allowing them to see. This act of seeing is central to their purpose. Most moai were placed on these ahu platforms with their backs to the sea, facing inland over the villages. Archaeological and oral tradition strongly suggests they represent deified ancestors, powerful chiefs who, in death, were believed to retain mana or spiritual power. By carving and erecting these figures, the community harnessed that power, turning the ancestors into perpetual watchmen who would protect and bring fertility to the land and the people. The scale of this endeavor for a small, isolated population is almost beyond comprehension. It represents a staggering investment of communal labor and resources, a society channeling its collective energy into a single, monumental expression of faith and identity. This leads to the great logistical puzzle, one that has captivated explorers for centuries. How did they move these multi-ton statues, some as heavy as a small whale, from the quarry to coastal sites often kilometers away? The island has no large trees suitable for rollers, and no evidence of large domesticated animals for pulling. The Rapa Nui themselves spoke of the statues walking across the land, a poetic clue that modern experiments have taken literally. One compelling theory, supported by successful tests, is that the moai were moved upright in a dynamic rocking motion. Using ropes tied at the statue's top and base, teams could rhythmically rock the moai side to side, while others constantly placed small stones or logs as pivots in front, effectively walking the statue forward in a slow, controlled shuffle. Another theory points to the island's network of prepared roads, which show were consistent with the statues being dragged horizontally on wooden sledges or log rollers, a method that would also require immense coordinated effort. Both methods speak to a society of brilliant practical engineers and master organizers, yet this very success may have sown the seeds of a profound transformation. The traditional narrative, popularized for decades, tells a cautionary tale of ecological collapse. It suggests that the statue-moving culture deforested the island to create rollers and sledges, leading to soil erosion, the loss of canoe-building materials, and ultimately, famine, conflict, and societal decline. This story framed the Moai as tragic monuments to a people's hubris. Modern archaeological research, however, paints a more nuanced and resilient picture. Evidence now suggests the deforestation was a slower process, influenced also by the arrival of invasive rats that prevented forest regeneration. While resource pressures certainly grew, the Rapa Nui response was not simply collapse but adaptation and cultural change. The most telling shift is in the statues themselves. At some point, the practice of carving and erecting moai ceased. The energy once poured into monumental sculpture was redirected. The ancestor worship did not end, but its expression transformed, possibly shifting toward the ritual birdman competition observed by later European arrivals. This was not a society that blindly carved itself into oblivion, but one that made choices, faced environmental challenges, and ultimately changed its traditions. The Moai, then, are not just symbols of ambition, but of profound cultural focus. They represent what a community can achieve when united by a shared spiritual vision, and they also stand as silent witnesses to the inevitable evolution of that vision. They remind us that human history is not a simple story of rise and fall, but of constant adaptation, where the greatest monuments are sometimes left behind not because of failure, but because the people who built them chose to walk a new path. The path from a sacred ancestor to a modern myth can be surprisingly short. On the shelves of museums and in the plots of adventure films, a collection of objects has achieved legendary status, blurring the line between ancient artifact and modern desire. These are the crystal skulls, human skull carvings meticulously shaped from single blocks of clear or milky quartz. For decades, popular stories have whispered that they are relics of lost Mesoamerican civilizations, perhaps the Aztecs or the Maya, imbued with mystical energies or holding the encoded wisdom of Atlantis. The most famous, like the Mitchell-Hedges skull, are marvels of craftsmanship with their smooth, polished surfaces and perfectly articulated jawbones that move as if hinged. They seem to glow with an inner light, objects of undeniable power and beauty that feel like they must be ancient. Yet when we subject them to the clear light of scientific inquiry, a different story emerges. The overwhelming consensus among archaeologists and materials scientists is that these iconic skulls are not ancient at all. Detailed analysis under high-powered microscopes reveals telltale marks of modern lapidary tools, rotary wheels with abrasives that simply did not exist in the pre-Columbian Americas. Furthermore, not a single crystal skull has ever been found in a documented, scientifically excavated archaeological context. They appear in history not from the ground, but from the collections of 19th-century art dealers and travelers, during a time when a fascination with the exotic and the occult was at its peak in Europe and America. This evidence strongly suggests they were crafted in workshops, likely in Germany or elsewhere in Europe, to feed a growing market for curiosities. So why does the myth persist with such tenacity? The crystal skulls tap into something deep within our collective imagination. They are perfect vessels for projection. Their material, quartz, has long been associated in various cultures with clarity, energy, and spiritual communication. Their form, the human skull, is a universal symbol of mortality, knowledge, and the threshold between worlds. Combined, they create an object that feels like a key, a tool for unlocking secrets. This powerful symbolism has allowed them to transcend their likely origins as clever forgeries to become genuine articles of modern mythology. They feature prominently in novels, films, and New Age beliefs, where they are said to possess healing properties, store information like a cosmic computer, or even predict the future. Their true power, therefore, lies not in any hidden ancient code, but in their ability to reflect our own enduring hopes and fears. They show how we can fall in love with an idea of the past, a romantic narrative of lost wisdom and high adventure, sometimes preferring that compelling story to a more mundane, documented truth. The crystal skulls ultimately teach us a crucial lesson about historical inquiry. They remind us to cherish the romance of mystery while also respecting the discipline of evidence. An object's ability to captivate us for a century does not automatically grant it an antiquity of millennia. In studying the past, we must constantly navigate between wonder and skepticism, allowing ourselves to be amazed by the genuine mysteries like Göbekli Tepe or the Antikythera Mechanism, while also developing the discernment to recognize when a legend has been manufactured, not unearthed. The skulls are not gateways to a lost world, but mirrors held up to our own, showing our timeless desire to find meaning, magic, and connection in the artifacts we discover, or in some cases choose to create. The final mystery rests not in stone or metal, but in the very flesh of the past. In the scorching, arid sands of China's Tarim Basin, a discovery emerged that would rewrite the map of ancient human movement. Here, in one of the most remote and inhospitable deserts on Earth, archaeologists uncovered hundreds of naturally preserved mummies, their features frozen in time by the dry, salty earth. These individuals, dating from as early as 1800 years before the Common Era to 200 years after, look nothing like what we might expect. They possess strikingly Caucasian features with light hair, tall statures, and faces that seem to gaze out from a different continent entirely. Their immediate presence in the heart of Asia is a profound historical shock, challenging the long-held narrative that East and West were separate worlds until the Silk Road connected them millennia later. These people, now known as the Tarim Mummies, were here, thriving in this harsh landscape, over 1,000 years before that famous network of trade routes was ever established. The questions they raise are immediate and profound. Who were they, and how did they journey so far into the heart of Asia? Their clothing provides the first stunning clues to a life of sophistication and distant connections. They were dressed in finely woven woolens, including caps, skirts, and leggings. Most astonishing are the textiles themselves, which include intricate tartan patterns, a woven plaid design most famously associated with the Celts of prehistoric Europe. This is not a simple similarity. The technological knowledge required to create such complex, multicolored weaves represents a high level of cultural development. It suggests these people did not arrive as lost wanderers, but as a community with a deep, established tradition of textile craftsmanship, a tradition that echoes far to the west. Alongside these fabrics, archaeologists found felted garments, leather boots, and even small baskets of ephedra, a medicinal plant indicating a rich material culture adapted to their environment. The mystery deepens with the circumstances of their final resting place. They were not placed in grand tombs, but often buried in simple, boat-shaped coffins made of inverted wooden hulls, covered with cattle hides and marked with tall wooden poles. This practice itself is unique, a ritual fingerprint that sets them apart from their neighbors. For over a century, theories about their origins have swirled. Were they nomadic herders from the Siberian steppes, traveling traders from the Iranian plateau, or perhaps remnants of a lost branch of early Indo-European migrants? Recent breakthroughs in genetic science have begun to provide clearer, though no less surprising, answers. Studies of their ancient DNA reveal that these individuals were not recent migrants from Europe at all. Instead, they were a remarkably isolated, local population with deep ancestral roots in ancient North Eurasia, a genetic lineage that also contributed to Native American and Siberian peoples. They were essentially a relic population, a pocket of ancient humanity that had settled in the Tarim Basin and remained genetically distinct for thousands of years, while simultaneously adopting and innovating cultural technologies that had spread across Eurasia, like that remarkable tartan weave. This genetic isolation amidst cultural connection is the ultimate revelation. It paints a picture of a resilient community that maintained its unique identity while participating in a vast, prehistoric network of ideas. They were not merely passive recipients of trade goods, but active participants in a web of exchange that transmitted skills and styles across unimaginable distances, long before written history began to record such movements. Their silent, preserved forms are a powerful testament to the complexity of our shared human story. They remind us that ancient maps were not empty, but filled with the journeys of diverse peoples whose interactions shaped technology, culture, and belief in ways we are only beginning to understand. The Tarim Mummies do not just challenge a timeline, they dissolve a boundary, showing us that the ancient world was never a collection of isolated civilizations, but a single, interconnected tapestry, woven together one thread and one life at a time. These scattered pieces form a single, haunting picture when viewed together. From the gears of Greece to the spheres of Costa Rica, from the buried temples of Turkey to the woven tartans of China, a persistent question echoes across the ages. How did so many different cultures, separated by vast oceans and centuries, accomplish works that strain our understanding of their time? The recurring theme is undeniable. Our ancestors repeatedly built, carved, and calculated with a precision that seems to leapfrog the accepted timeline of human innovation. This pattern presents us with two profound possibilities, each reshaping our view of history. The first is the idea of widespread lost knowledge, a global library of techniques and principles that flourished in antiquity, only to be consumed by the fires of time, conquest, or natural disaster. Perhaps the principles behind the Antikythera Mechanism or the acoustic planning of the Longyou Caves were not singular miracles, but fragments of a common, sophisticated understanding that has since vanished from the record. The second possibility is equally compelling. It suggests that innovation is not a single, linear race, but a garden where similar ideas can bloom independently in isolated soils. Different cultures, facing similar challenges or contemplating similar mysteries about the cosmos, may have arrived at parallel solutions through sheer human ingenuity, only for those solutions to be forgotten when social priorities shifted or civilizations transformed. This is where the scholarly debate finds its richest ground. Are we looking at advanced ancient science, or are we misreading a different language of meaning? A carving like the Dendera Light is the perfect example. Our modern, technology-saturated minds instinctively see a light bulb, but to its creators, it was a spiritual narrative about the birth of a god, a story told in stone. The danger lies in projecting our own worldview onto theirs, in turning their profound symbolic expressions into our literal technical blueprints. Yet the counterargument persists. Could their symbolism have been a way to encode practical understanding? Might their myths about serpentine energies and celestial journeys have been a metaphorical framework for describing observable natural forces? This ambiguity is precisely why these enigmas are so valuable. They force archaeology to evolve from a discipline of mere excavation into one of deep interpretation. Solving them requires a fusion of hard science, like the geochemical analysis of stone or the genetic sequencing of ancient remains, with the nuanced, empathetic work of understanding cultural context and symbolic logic. A radar scan can reveal a hidden chamber, but only anthropology can guess what ritual might have taken place inside. These collective puzzles teach us a vital lesson about history itself. The past is not a neat, linear progression from simple to complex, from ignorant to enlightened. It is a vast, intricate tapestry, and we have only recovered a handful of its threads. Many of the brightest colors and most intricate patterns are lost to us forever, leaving gaps that our imagination naturally tries to fill. This is why humility is the most essential tool for any explorer of antiquity. We must approach these wonders not with condescension, assuming our ancestors were primitive, nor with unchecked fantasy, attributing every mystery to aliens or Atlantis. Instead, we must meet them with respectful curiosity, acknowledging that their intelligence was not lesser but often differently focused. Their priorities, cosmic harmony, ancestral reverence, communal ritual, drove them to invest generations in projects that we might consider impractical, yet which achieved a kind of perfection we still struggle to comprehend. Ultimately, these 15 unexplained phenomena are more than a list of curiosities. They are a chorus of voices from the deep past, reminding us that human potential has always been vast and varied. They challenge us to keep questioning our assumptions, to blend open-minded wonder with rigorous scrutiny, and to remember that every answer we uncover in the dust likely reveals several new, even more fascinating, questions waiting in the shadows. The journey from a single gear to a silent stone giant traces a map of human brilliance written in forgotten languages. These 15 unexplained phenomena are not isolated curiosities. They are fragments of a grand, interconnected narrative about our past, revealing a world far more intricate and intellectually vibrant than our traditional timelines often allow. Each one, from the celestial calculator of the Greeks to the woven tartans of the Tarim Basin, acts as a keyhole, offering a fleeting glimpse into the minds of those who came before us. They challenge the simplistic story of linear progress, replacing it with a tapestry of parallel discoveries, profound spiritual inquiries, and bursts of technical genius that seem to flicker across continents and millennia. What they collectively underscore is that ancient ingenuity was not a lesser version of our own, but a different expression of it, often directed toward unifying the cosmic, the communal, and the sacred in ways we are still learning to comprehend. While modern science, with its tools of genetic analysis, satellite imaging, and materials chemistry, steadily chips away at the how, the fundamental why often remains beautifully elusive. This enduring allure is the true gift of these mysteries. They are not problems to be solved and filed away, but perpetual sparks for wonder. They reconnect us with the most fundamental human drives, the curiosity that looks at a star and charts its path, the reverence that shapes a mountain to honor an ancestor, the collective will that moves a multi-ton sentinel to watch over a village. They remind us that history is not a closed book with a definitive final chapter, but an ongoing, collaborative investigation. Every new scan of a pyramid, every reinterpretation of a faded manuscript, every soil sample from a buried temple has the potential to rewrite a paragraph or even a whole page of the human story. So as we reflect on these 15 enigmas, consider which one resonates most deeply with you. Does the perfect silence of the Longyou Caves pull at your imagination, or does the coded cosmos of the Antikythera Mechanism ignite your curiosity? The conversation about our origins is never finished, and your perspective is a valuable part of it. Share your thoughts on which mystery you find most compelling, and join us as we continue to explore the vast and wonderful unknown of our shared past.